And to me, storytelling and art making is the most important thing that human beings do. Because without that, there is no meaning. Meaning comes out of stories. We compare ourselves to other people's stories. We see where we fit into our own story. And out of that comes meaning, purpose. We wouldn't do anything if we didn't feel like we were on a journey somewhere, that there was something worth achieving. And that is a story that's in our heads. The kind of sculpture I do probably comes under the category of assemblage, and under a subheading metal sculpture, welded steel sculpture. Sculpture has to feel like it has its own needs, its own desires, its own life. Otherwise it's dead metal, it's got no life at all. But the idea of the assemblage is you collect items that you find in the world and you bring them together and somehow form something new. And it's the way two shapes interact when you put them together that's the spark of my inspiration. Usually I'll just find an object that will suggest something to me, like a head or a hand, not too literally, because I never want my sculptures to look figurative. And if something really excites me, then I put them together. Welding is great because it's like instant glue and it's very strong. And so I create, you could say, little sentences that then I look to find other sentences to connect them to, so that the overall finished piece is a complete statement. It started for me when I was a child on the farm, and we had a lot of machinery, a lot of tools, a lot of objects around the farm. And I would find myself, by habit, I couldn't help lining things up in my sight so that I got a nice combination of shapes from a piece of a tractor or part of a plough. And this is long before I knew about modern art, but it was something I couldn't help doing anyway. I see a strong analogy between the character of people in films and characters of sculptures. They're stories. And stories are character, meaning you reveal the qualities of something through its struggle, through its challenges. Take this woman here walking with a pram. She has the qualities of a sculpture. She has purpose. She has a reason for being. She's going somewhere. She walks in a certain way. She's credible. And we don't know where she's going. We don't know why she's going there. But still, we believe her. A sculpture has to have that quality. We don't know where it's come from. We don't know where it's going. We don't know its full story. But it has to, in the moment that we see it, in its frozen state, it has to feel like it has its own purpose. It's going somewhere. It needs something. It wants something. My kind of sculpture, anyway, has that. It needs that. It's just a piece of metal I found, and I cut it at this angle here and counterbalanced it here. Now, it has character because this shape that I found looks like some kind of figure that's calling or screaming or singing, and it has a little stumpy wing, like a bird that can't fly. And it's in balance with this screw thread at the back. So to me, there's a story there that the geometry and the industrial nature of this screw thread and the square that links them is somehow trapping this little character from flying away. He's trying to stretch out to go somewhere, to live. And these things are restraining him, but at the same time they're creating the balance that he needs not to fall over. So within that little three shapes, there's a story. And that story gives the work a character of struggle, a character of symmetry, a character of restraint. And this idea of the mouth that's trying to call out characterizes something I really love about sculpture, and that is its stillness and its silence. We live in a really busy world where things are always demanding attention and making a noise and movement, but sculpture just sits there quietly and screams silently or sings silently. So that's something I like about it. The thing about it is too, in the same way as when you're writing a character for a film or creating a character in a piece of metal, it tells you what to do. You can only guide it to a certain extent. At least that's the way it feels. The character takes on its own story because within their nature, they know where they want to go. They know what they're capable of. They know what they need to do with their existence. And a sculpture does the same. Once it's started, I can only help it finish itself in the way that novelists talk about characters writing the novel for them. It's a very similar process. It desires. What is that sculpture trying to do in the world? Is it trying to fill its space? Is it trying to crawl across the surface? Is it trying to defend itself from whatever lies out there? Is it exploring its own space? Is it celebrating its own space and the possibility of movement? Sometimes just to sit and contemplate for a second your physicalness removed from story, just your mass or the way we spread out into fine fingers, without thinking about what those fingers do, just the matter of it is wonderful. It's a kind of meditation, I suppose, on just the miracle of being. And of course, to suggest matter or to suggest mass, or you have to contrast it with space and emptiness and lightness. So every sculpture is a dialogue between space and mass and line, because your eye has to follow a line, talks about the space that it encapsulates or describes. Line also gives a sense of time, because it takes time to follow a line. But it's a different kind of time to the time where things move. It's just the time of stillness, which is a kind of eternal moment that you can revisit and revisit in a way that the rest of our life is constantly transforming and moving and changing. The beauty of a sculpture is you come back to it and it's exactly how it was, or almost, minusculely, if at all, different than the last time you saw it. So it has an eternity about it. Again, it kind of taps into the really fundamental aspects of being: mass, time, and space.
pick?
When you
Because it's where you're going to join them
finish
up,
this,
where you're going to lace them up.
you're going to pull out the best ones, the ones you like, and hang them up here.
Oh, thank you. That's great.
And so after that, hands-on, we make an assembly of the film, and that is cutting pictures to live side by side so that each of those pictures has a new life. And that's exactly what you do with sculpture. In the way I work, you put two shapes together and a new life is born out of that interaction. It's a kind of montage. It's also physical in the same way. I mean, film, we tape it together. With my sculpture, we weld it together, but there's not that much difference. You also have to be very sensitive in editing film to what it's saying to you. You can't tell it to be a certain way. You have to allow each shot, each frame, each moment to tell you how long it needs to exist before you cut to the next moment. And with a sculpture, the size of each shape in relation to the others is a very similar principle. I mean, I think I took to editing after being a sculptor really easily because the process was already in my head. And I always feel very free in the editing room, not necessarily to stick to how the shots were originally planned, but to look for what the shot has to offer so that I can put it next to the next best shot in the way you do with sculpture. And it may not be the way it was designed in the script. I'm finding the more I have exhibitions, the less I respond to exterior things, the less I respond to people's responses to my sculptures. Or I'm kind of more calm and more centered now, and I just continue to let out that thing inside which is clear to me. My favourite artworks by anybody are always the works that where I feel like the artist is exploring something for themselves, not even exploring, stating something for themselves. I remember a wonderful quote from Tarkovsky when he said, people say my films are experimental. He said, I'm not experimenting, I know exactly what I want. I just do it, and they look experimental because they're different to other people's films. They're different to other people's films because he's doing exactly what he wants. And if I do exactly what I want for myself, then I'll create something unique because it's coming from inside. And I think it's important for people to see as many examples of other human beings being in conversation with themselves so that they can learn to do it themselves, have a relationship with their own internal workings. So I don't think my next exhibition will be affected by this last exhibition. I'll just sit down with the material, the fabric that I use, and find myself, or find, I don't mean it in an egotistical way, myself is not that important, but the fact that it's an honest response, personal response to the material means the work will have character. It's very hard to get people to say anything very much about your work. But the first time that happened, I was devastated. When I was a student and I had my first exhibition, I never felt so lonely in all my life because I realized no one there really understood the journey I had been on And so every work of sculpture to me meant a great deal. And I could see they didn't, I mean, people liked them. People said they liked them and they bought them, they enjoyed them, but they hadn't lived through the journey that I had in creating it, and that made me feel lonely. To boil it down to the thing I like most about sculpture, the one thing that I think it expresses differently and better than any other art form is we are here, we are now, we are mass, and we occupy space. It's a long sentence, but to me that's what sculpture does best.
Oh,